You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Naruto Meets Americandad? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of DRAGONfromheaven on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Ring. Yeah. A transparent voice answered. Uzumaki, we need you for another assignment that is the utmost importance. Failure is not an option, understand? Yeah, I got it. What's the assignment? You know I'm busy with this mission, right? The Uzumaki answered, his voice being muffled by a face mask, while his features was covered by a hoodie that seemed to stick to his skin and the thunder that boomed every few seconds. Yes, I understand that, but this is more important, so I want your current mission completed as quickly as possible. The long-term mission in question is to keep tabs and reports of a family named the Smiths. The voice answered back. Raising an eyebrow in confusion at such a mission, he replied back. What? This so-called utmost mission is to watch over a family. Are you joking me? Are you still mad that I boned your mom? The Uzumaki answered smugly. He could already tell the person was twitching in annoyance and anger. Youtt, cough anyway, this family is dangerous because of an unknown virus that spread through their house, that is very toxic to humans. We want you to make sure they're not planning anything or housing something they shouldn't. Even finding out on why the virus was at their premises in the first place. The figure said calmly, regaining their emotions. Ah, okay, gotcha boss man, but I request double the pay. They replied chuckling. Fine, just do whatever to get the job done. I expect a weekly reports until further notice, and Uzumaki, do not fail. The caller said growling before hanging up. Grouchy. Now then, come out wherever you are Mr. Gato. Uzumaki said looking for the short midget which was on the description on top of a rooftop. He finally spotted the little coward, who was being tailed by multiple bodyguards. Ah, there you are. 5 bodyguards, piece of cake. They said disappearing into the shadows. Gato. I feel like someone is after me, like they can squash my very existence in a second, and my gut must be playing on me because of that bad sushi. Good thing I killed the cook, hehehe. While Gato was in his own little world, he didn't notice all the people he passed were all giving him death glares and looks of malice and hatred. This man was the lowest of the low. He stole from people, killed, raped, forced people into slavery, and more hideous crimes, but the police were either too busy or were scared of him, so they were powerless against him, and if they did rise up, they would be executed on sight, or showed no mercy, especially the women. They also couldn't kill him themselves, because he always had up to 5 or more bodyguards protecting him, and none of them knew how to fight. So all they could do was send him hateful glares, while he wallows in his money. Gato finally came out of his thoughts to sneer at all the insects giving him hateful glares. Ha! What are you fools looking at? Are you that eager to die? Gato gloated, making all heads turn away from him, and continue their business. Well, he was in his own self-absorbed arrogance and wealth. He didn't notice that one of his guards was pulled into the darkness of an alley, hand covering their mouth, preventing them from screaming. The same process happened multiple times. Before the final guard something was off and looked behind him, seeing a transparent shadow lurking behind him and his friends missing. OSHT. The grunt said, trying to pull up his sawed-off shotgun, only to have his arm and neck broken for the effort. Ha! Gato said, before there was a gun to his head. Any last words, scum? The transparent voice said. Wait. Spare my life. I'll give you anything you've so longing. Money. Women. Power. Fame. Anything. Please spare me. Gato sobbed out, scared shitless, if the PSS stain was anything to go by. Sorry, time's up, the anonymous voice said, before Gato was gifted with a new hole to the face. It took everyone who watched the assassination a second. Their tormentor was finally dead. They could finally go home and sleep peacefully at night without worrying about his gown storming in their places and doing something to them. They cheered, they sobbed tears of happiness, and thanked the person and the gods for this. Speaking of the person who killed Gato, they tried looking for him, to give him a gift, a arranged marriage, something. He saved them from a demon, he was an angel sent from God himself, but sadly they could not find him. It was as if he disappeared completely. They would write down this strange entity and remember him as the one who took down the future tyrant. Langley Falls, Virginia. It was a bright sunny day and it was as if otherworldly entity was gifting the beauty of today. Currently there was a orange and black Lamborghini Veneno Roadster, with a fox with 9 tails growling on the side of the car. Music was coming out in a steady beat, rocking the car slightly every once in a while, and inside were 2 unique occupants, relaxing to the music. On their way to their new home they were assigned to by their undercover agency, the CIA. The first one was the driver who had spiky blonde hair that reached to his neck, with 2 long bangs, that went down to his shoulders, with one bang slightly covering their left eye with red hair slightly licking the top of his head, as if at any minute it would catch on fire. He had cerulean clear blue eyes. He was wearing white long-sleeve t-shirt with Japanese kanji for 1 through 9, and black jeans. His footwear that he was wearing was orange and black high tops. He was wearing a green gem necklace, and there was bar-like whiskers on his face that was actually tattoos. The young man was above average in height, as he was 6 feet 3 inches, he had a well-built body, of that of a football player, but lean as a swimmer or track runner. While retaining a young adult appearance, when in fact he was 17. The other passenger was a puppy-sized orange fox. Anyone would have thought it was a regular fox, but upon closer notice, it was beyond normal. It had 9 long tails, and crimson-slitted eyes that expressed laziness. The fox was actually a kitsune, an ancient fox spirit hauled from Japanese and Chinese ancestry. The kitsune mighty tails was blowing out in the strong winds, while its face was in the wind enjoying itself as if it was a dog. Suddenly the kitsune decided to speak up. "Say Naruto, where are we going again?" The kitsune asked curiously. Now most people would have been freaked out about a talking animal, but to the driver this was an everyday occurrence. "We are going to 43 Cherry Street, I think that was what the boss said." Kurama, the now identified driver, said casually. "Ah, okay, think there will be any hot women there?" Kurama asked perversely. "I sure hope so, buddy. Maybe one with a decent-sized rack," Naruto said with an equal smile of perversion. "Ha! Now you're thinking. Also, how was your last contract?" Kurama said, finally facing Naruto. "It was good, got to kill the BSTRD, got a amazing pay to kill a future tyrant, and got to F a few women before leaving. All lives good, ain't it, Kurama?" Naruto said, smiling contently. "It sure is, bro," Kurama said, grinning, a feral one. Naruto could remember how he met Kurama. The CIA were experimenting with the spirit world and were able only to bring one spirit out before their machine. The spirit then took the form of the Chino Kitsune. It may have been small and cute, but it sure raised hell in the agency. They were about to put down the spirit by any means necessary, when Naruto finally decided to take the Kitsune for himself. It was strong at first, definitely strong, but through all the scratching, biting, growling, pissing, the Kitsune finally warmed up to him and spoke to him for the very first time since coming to the human realm. After that they were practically inseparable, becoming quick best friends and a weird understanding to each other. 30 minutes later. Finally reaching some neighborhoods, he strolled by each of them slowly, to find which house was his. While doing so, all the women blushed and swooned at the CC man and cute fox, all the man fumed or grumbled, especially the ones with wives and girlfriends. All the children awed at the shiny and fancy car. Finally they came to a stop in front of a fancy 2-story tan house, with a lot of windows and the for sale sign still up. The most interesting part was their 6 teenagers walking up the walkway. 4 of them were boys and the last 2 were girls that were having a conversation. From what little parts he could hear from his CIA training, he could deduct they were gonna videotape something in the supposed vacant house, and he had a pretty good idea what. He also heard a retarded kid shouting something about eavesdropping. Sighing, he got out of his car with Kurama before turning it off and walking toward his new house. Right before he opened his door, he saw the 2 girls that came walked out with a frown and the booze he saw the boys carrying with them walking out the door. However, that soon changed when they saw him. They blushed and drooled at him. "How's it going, girls? May I ask why you're in my new home?" Naruto said curiously. He wasn't mad, just curious. Oh, we were gonna flash some nerds for some beer, but some things lead to another and we got out of there. The red-headed one said. "Ah, okay, you can run along now. Also, what are your names?" "Stacy," the red-headed one said. "Mindy," the blonde said. After saying they headed off, before they could fully pass Naruto, they both were slapped on the butt, making them eek and Also, ladies, make sure to stop by next time, K. Naruto chirped with a grin, making both nod slowly with a very dark blush. Now on to other business. Naruto drawled before opening the doors. "You ruined everything," a unknown voice said, which was the first voice Naruto heard. "I'm giving these poor, forgotten people a new lease on life." A melodic voice snapped. When he saw who said that, he gasped as she was a beauty. Seeing her oval face with her pierced, refined small nose along with her dark eyes that would make one feel go into a deep, endless void. Her pierced, supple lips with a slight pink tinge to them that makes him want to explore deeply. Once gazing down her slim, pear-shaped figure to see the perfect BRST shape of low to mid-D cup. Gazing further down, seeing the uncovered slim stomach with a navel ring adding more to the appeal. He caught the sight of her round/bubble, but that was very firm and tight that he could guess he could bounce a coin off of it. Despite wearing slightly baggy pants, he could see the indications that her legs are toned and are long that could go on for miles. All in his book Naruto was sure he had just gazed upon the epitome of beauty, and that voice just makes things so much better. Of course the image ended up getting ruined with something that disgusted him greatly, was a dead homeless man dead in a corner, and other homeless people fighting over his cloths and corpse. Oi! Oi! What are you people doing in my house?" Naruto shouted out, catching everyone's attention. "Your house." "But my mom said this house was vacant for a long time," a short nerdy kid said angrily. He was angry because first he wasn't getting any melons and second this person storms in and thinks he runs the place. "Well, I have the paperwork saying I own this house now. I can legally kill or call the cops on all you right now," Naruto said, smirking, while the nerds and girl looked horrified. Wait. Please, reasonable, don't kick these people out just yet." "I'll do anything," the girl said desperately. "What's your name, girl?" Naruto said with a neutral face, making her nervous. "Hailey Smith, sir. That dweeb who yelled at you earlier is my idiotic brother, Steve," Hailey said in slight amount of obedience, which he liked greatly. "Hey!" Steve said indignantly. "Well, Hailey, what are you people doing in my new home?" Naruto said, while Kurama growled at them, making the Jewish-looking one hide behind the fat one. "Well, I thought this house was never gonna be sold, so I turned it into a homeless shelter for the needy," Hailey said shyly, her brags and confident attitude gone just from looking at this stud. "Ah, honorable, but I do not approve," Naruto said, frowning slightly. "Please, sir. Just let them stay a little longer, that's all I ask," Hailey said, begging. Fine, I'll give these people a little while longer, say about a week." Naruto replied back smiling. Of course by that time you'll need to clear out so I can properly move things in. Deal. You won't regret this. Hailey said. Naruto had a gut feeling he would regret it in the long run. Week later. Yeah, it turned out he definitely regretted it. He should have listened to his gut feeling, because exactly that week, this Steve and his father who goes by the name Stan decided to host a homeless brawl and was even getting money for it, in his own backyard. On the plus side he was able to make money from it and see that idiotic man Stan get the tar beat out of him, even though it was known all around he was a CIA agent as well. He also got to see Stan's hot wife, Francine, who sold him the house over the phone, and he had to say, like Hailey, she was very appealing. No argument there on where Hailey got the majority of her appearance from. She had long blonde hair that rippled down to just a bit above her well-shaped, but that was just the beginning of her gorgeous figure. Francine also had an hourglass figure that was more developed than Hailey, who was more petite compared to her mother. Francine's bust was definitely mid to high E in size and very perky from what he saw when he met the woman for the first time. She had full lips and soft blue eyes that shined a bit naturally. She wore a red jacket that still showed off her figure, a purple shirt underneath it that seemed to accent her eyes, a purple ascot, cream-colored women's business pants that clung to her as well, and red-heeled shoes that made her toned legs go longer than normal. To him she didn't look a day over her early 30s, and she acted very cheerful, sweet, and entirely unlike her husband and son. He somewhat felt bad for the fact she was stuck with an uncaring and somewhat idiotic husband and son, though her daughter seemed different, as she seemed a bit rebellious but still very nice and sweet in her own unique way. The week had its ups and downs, UPS, because he got to talk to Francine more and make her blush, and Hailey with how he made her swoon for him. The downs, however, were because Francine's idiotic husband turned his living room into a gym for homeless people, and had to host a brawl tournament for homeless and make money out of it. It was incredibly sickening to him. Of course he couldn't be a hypocrite because it was now in his backyard, so he took 50% of the profit, but he didn't want to see the fights. It took him a couple hours to get the stink out of his house and get his furniture moved into the house, as well as get everything of his setup such as his computer and security systems. After everything was over, Stan and Steve as well as everybody else left, but oddly enough Hailey stuck around to help him get situated. "You know you don't have to stick around and help me, Hailey," he told her with a chuckle as she blushed at him. "Well, I felt bad considering how stupid my dad and brother did those stupid things in your house," she said as she set down a box off in his room before she sat down on the edge of his bed. "It's fine, since some good did come out of it," he said as he smirked at her and sent her a wink that made her blush a bit more. "Oh, and what is that?" Hailey said as she sent him a suggestive smile and leaned closer to Naruto, trying to push up her bust to her advantage. Normally she wasn't like this with men she had met not very long ago, but there was something about Naruto that honestly made her want him. Hence why she was on the attack with him. "Why don't you come here and find out?" Naruto asked as he sent Hailey a flirting grin. The second after saying that, they both slowly leaned in to mash their lips together into a passionate embrace, but before they could actually connect for the embrace, Naruto's bedroom door was barged down, with Stan coming in with a frown. "Hailey, come home this instant. Francine and I need your help," Stan said, completely overlooking at what the two were about to do. "Dad! Leave me alone. I'll be there in a minute, gosh," Hailey said, scowling at Stan as a dark blush broke out on her face. "You were better when you were little, I swear. I don't know what it is about kids today taking so damn long," Stan said, grumbling to himself while walking out, ignoring the fact he busted down someone's door as the owner of the door struggled not to beat him with said broken door. "Naruto, I'm extremely sorry for the door and my father's douchebag behavior. Maybe I can make it up to you, say, dinner?" Hailey asked hopefully. "I'd love to, and don't worry about the door, I'll get it fixed in no time," Naruto said, forcing a smile as he wasn't mad at Hailey but her idiot of a father. "Okay," Hailey said, smiling happily, thankful at her minor victory before walking out, silently cheering to herself about it as Naruto smiled and stared at her rear as she left. DMN Stan, I was so close. Oh well, I can be patient, he thought as he smirked as he saw her leaving from his front yard. 1 week later. It had been 1 full week since he had the conversation with Hailey and her promise to a dinner date. Nothing really eventful really happened, except setting up his house and getting his resignation papers to go Pearl Bailey High School. Apparently that Steve guy also went there, so he might be seeing him a lot more often. Today was his first day going to the high school. He knew he was gonna have a lot of fun there, he always trusted his gut. He honestly didn't have to go to school due to his job, but it was a great place to meet gorgeous girls as well as getting intel about what is going on around town, which in his profession intel was very important. This school has got some lovely ladies, he thought as he sent a few some winks that made them blush and even a few faint. He recognized Hailey's brother Steve as he got pushed into a locker with his group of friends but paid them no real mind as someone crossed his line of sight. She wore a cheerleading uniform that revealed her bare midriff and clung to her moderate high D-cup melons that bounced a bit as she walked. The skirt of the uniform seemed to show off her well-toned rear that he saw a few flashes of as she seemed to sway her hips. She had long light brown hair that went to her mid-back as she turned around and let him see her brown eyes that looked back at him with a smirk on her lips before she walked over to him and gave him a smile. You must be new here 'cause I'm sure I'd remember you. What's your name? She asked as she leaned towards him, flashing him a quick peek down her shirt and at her cleavage. Naruto Uzumaki, and yes I am new here and what a welcome this is, he said as he trailed his finger down her bare arm, smiling as she shivered a bit with a smile on her face. Though what is your name so I can make sure to remember this lovely welcome? Lisa Silver, she replied as a blush broke out on her cheeks as she tried to move closer to him before the bell rang making her groan. Well I think class is about to start but I'm sure we might have a few classes together, she said as she smiled and spun around, intentionally giving him a small flash of her panties in the process. Keep an eye out for me if we do, she said as she started to walk down the hall, swaying her hips slightly. Oh I will Lisa, trust me, I will, he said as he stared at her as she was leaving. DMN, first person I meet at this school and it's a hot babe. I am totally loving this mission so far, he thought as he walked through the hall with a smirk on his face. Safe to say it was starting out great and he hadn't even gotten to the thing he was waiting for the most as a certain dark-haired beauty still owed him a date. Lunch time. Naruto groaned as he forgot how tiring school actually was, though thankfully it paid off with all the women that seemed to be attracted to him as he now sat at a table full of girls who had followed him or joined once he sat down. Lisa Silver, the beauty he had met earlier in the day sat straight across from him, which he was thankful for as she kept leaning over and giving him a view of her sizable assets as well as the fact she kept brushing her leg against his from under the table. At the table there were other various beauties such as other cheerleaders though there were 2 other girls that piqued his interest. The first had short blonde hair and light skin with a light layer of freckles across her cheeks that accented her light green eyes. She wore a tight white shirt that revealed her midriff and made her high below C-cup melons even bigger and accented their perkiness. She also had a red tight skirt that was incredibly short that showed off her long legs. Her name was Lindsay Coolidge and from what he could see she was also a cheerleader but seemed to not like wearing the uniform like the others. The next girl had a very mature body for her age. Like Lindsay she too had short blonde hair but unlike Lindsay hers was a softer blonde and a bit longer, ending at her shoulders where Lindsay's ended just at the end of her face with soft green eyes. She wore a low-cut deep V shirt that showed off a lot of her clearly DD cup melons. Her entire figure was incredibly curvy with a slim waist and quite sizable rear that was held in short blue shorts that barely seemed to fit and that showed off her legs nicely. Her name was Becky Arangino and she was only 16 but easily had the body of an 18 or 19-year-old. Naruto honestly couldn't help but take looks at them all, which made them all giggle and blush as they didn't seem to mind at all. You girls sure do know how to make the new kid feel welcome don't you, he said as they started to giggle again and smile at him. Hey new guy, a voice yelled behind him as he turned and rose an eyebrow as he noticed that it was Steve. Yes, Steve. What do you want? He asked as Steve glared at him. Stop taking all the ladies from the rest of us, especially me, he yelled as he sent a wink towards Lisa, who physically cringed from it. Naruto chuckled dryly at the awkward kid as he shook his head. Look, it isn't my fault all these lovely ladies wanted to talk with me. I'm not forcing them to stay here, they just want to, so how about you let the girls do what they want to do without someone whining at them, he said as he gave Steve a quick look that basically meant stop bothering me, before Steve quickly got the message and seemed to scurry off. Oh Naruto, you look so hot when you take charge. Lisa purred out as she rubbed his crotch under the table with her foot that had slipped out of her shoe. He smirked at her as he stroked her leg under the table. Well, what can I say, I'm not fond of men who expect women to do whatever they say when they aren't okay with it, he said as he slipped his foot out of his sandal and moved it across under the table before Lisa let out a surprised gasp before biting her lip. Oh, are you okay, Lisa? Lindsay asked as she was about to look under the table before Lisa slammed her hand on the table. I'm perfect, Lindsay, just perfect, she said as she grabbed his foot and pressed it up against her more. Oh, I was right, I am going to love this school, he thought as he smirked at Lisa, who was in a slight daze. If this was how things went every day, then things were going to be perfect. Shortly after school. At times like this Naruto couldn't help but thank whatever deity gave him his devil's luck as he found himself making out with Lisa Silver passionately behind the school as she pressed up against him, allowing him to feel her chst up against him. Originally she was just showing him around the school a bit more after the bell rang, but it had quickly evolved to a makeout session that he was very thankful for. So quick to make out with me, are you? Are you like this with every hot guy you see? He teased as she blushed. No, only with really hot ones, which has only been you so far, she said as she bit her lip once she felt his hands on her rear. So you're quick to make out with me because I'm special? He asked with a smirk as he nibbled at her neck. I feel honored, he teased as she moaned more and pressed up against him more. Plus the fact you played with me with your foot all lunch drove me crazy, so this is a little revenge, he whispered in her ear as he slowly slid his hands up her tight shirt and gave her melons a soft squeeze that made her toss her head back in a that she muffled by covering her mouth with her hand, so as to not alert wandering students and staff. And Naruto, do more, she whispered out as he smirked and was about to slide up her shirt to expose her chst when a loud honk sounded out behind them, making them both growl as they turned to see a bunch of Lisa's friends waving to her from a car that had just pulled up into the back parking lot. I am so going to murder them, Lisa growled out as she grabbed Naruto's hands from under her shirt to pull them out but moaned as he gave one last squeeze. We will continue this later, Naruto, she said with a wink before she stomped away, sending a glare at her friends, allowing him to stare at her butt, which jiggled nicely with each stomp, as she walked away. I swear if I get interrupted from my fun one more time I will kill someone, which I am legally allowed to, he thought with a groan as he waved to Lisa as she got into the car before he walked away. He sighed as he pulled out his keys and walked towards his Lamborghini that he had gotten a parking spot in the faculty parking lot due to his connections and not wanting any annoying kids to accidentally scratch his car. Whoa, is this your car? Someone asked as he turned to see several jocks staring at it with envy in their eyes. Yeah, this is my baby. Now you might want to step back a bit so I can drive it out, he said as he unlocked it and got into the driver's seat, starting the car and letting the loud roar of the engine block out their voices. Boy, I can't wait to tell Kurama of the girls I found, he thought with a smirk as he gunned it out of the parking lot as AC/DC blared from his stereo. Naruto ignored the speed limit as he drove through town as he always did due to him having special plates that he had gotten long ago because of his job description of need to be able to arrive at his job sites in short amounts of time. He smiled to the women he passed as he barreled through town before he arrived at his house and parked his car inside the garage. About time you got home from that godforsaken school, Kurama's voice spoke out as he entered the house to see the nine-tailed fox laid out on the couch with one eye open staring at him. Well, sorry, I got a little preoccupied with a brown-haired beauty, he said as Kurama grew a perverse grin. Ah, that's my kit. Always quick to get the ladies, Kurama joked as he stood up and stretched his legs before jumping onto his shoulder. Details kid, I want to hear about everyone you met, he said with a smirk as Naruto chuckled. Oh boy, where do I start, he said with a large smirk as he fell back onto the couch and described, in great detail, all the girls he had met earlier today, and how they acted and looked like. Oh kid, you have the greatest luck, I swear. Now I just need get myself a woman, Kurama said, grumbling about brats, ladies, and luck. Well, who knows, maybe you'll find your own vixen soon enough, Kurama, but for now I need to call in my date with Hailey, he said with a smirk as he pulled out his cell phone and dialed Hailey's number. That she had left behind for him on his table after she was called home by Stan, while Kurama glared at him for teasing. Hello, Hailey. It's me, Naruto. How does a nice dinner in a few hours sound, he asked with a smile after hearing Hailey's reply. Well, I'll come by and pick you up in, say 3 hours, he asked before she agreed happily. Great, see you then, he said before he hung up. Okay, now need to find the best place for us to eat at, he muttered to himself as he headed upstairs. I know she's a vegetarian, so a place with vegetarian food options would be best. At least that slims things down on choices, I think, he said with a chuckle before turning on his computer to look for restaurants. After a bit of time looking up choices, he had found the perfect one for their date and now needed to finish getting things ready. He was actually looking forward to this, so he wanted to make it end on a very good note. Smith House. Naruto smiled as he pulled up at the Smith house as he wore a clean white button-up shirt with an orange stripe down the sleeves that he had the top 2 buttons undone and black slacks with his usual black sandals on. As he walked up the steps he felt something looking from him from the attic window but shrugged it off as he went towards the door and rang the doorbell. While that was going on he activated his car to play soft romantic music in the background. Coming. Hailey's voice yelled out as he heard some crashes before the door opened up and he resisted the urge to drop his jaw. Hailey stood before him in a tight short black dress and black heels that revealed all of her toned legs and nice shapely rear that the heels helped as well. It also had a relatively low cut to reveal a nice amount of cleavage. Wow, you look gorgeous, he said as he stroked her cheek as she blushed and smiled at him. Thanks Naruto, you look really nice yourself, she said before she was pushed into his arms as her father pushed her out of the way. I don't know who you are or why you're asking my daughter of all people out, but if you are taking Smith BLD out she will return at no later than 10 p.m. and untouched. You got that, Stan said as he cocked his gun and pointed it at Naruto. Naruto resisted the urge to disarm the father in front of him as he merely raised an eyebrow at him. I believe Hailey is 19 and her own woman, so I believe she has the choice of what happens and when she returns, he said as he stared Stan in the eyes with some killing intent behind his words. Come on Naruto, let's just leave before he ruins this like he always does, Hailey said as she linked her arm through his before he smiled at her and nodded as he led her to the car and helped her in after he opened the door for her. He smiled back to her parents as he waved at Francine, who had recognized him. Ah, would you look at that Stan, he's a gentleman. I told you that you didn't have to worry, Francine said as she watched her daughter drive off with her date. Whatever, if he doesn't bring her back in time I'll have to call the cleaners again, Stan muttered out as Francine rolled her eyes. Wow, you have a really nice car, Hailey said as they drove slowly through the city. Thanks, I have a few others in storage but this has to be my favorite one to use on an everyday basis, he said as he smiled at her as she blushed as he caught her staring at him again. You're in high school yet you have numerous cars. What kind of job do you have and how can you afford all of them, she asked with a curious tone as he chuckled at her. Well, first off I'm a beta tester of sorts for this one company which I'm obligated on not revealing so that said company's products won't be taken by their competitors. The rest of the money is actually from a trust fund and inheritance I had gotten from my deceased parents, he said as she nodded along but grew a frown as he mentioned his parents but she decided not to bring it up and ruin the mood. Probably will bring this up later on when the topic seems appropriate to bring up. So where are you taking me for dinner, she asked as she smiled at him. Well, I remember you mentioning that you like veggies more than anything so I made sure to find a place with plenty of veggies since it would be terrible if you didn't have options, he said with a smile as she was glad on hearing this and him consider her feelings since in the past with several men she had dated they didn't consider it and had just assumed she enjoyed eating regular food. She smiled as they pulled into the parking lot for one of the city's nicer restaurants that actually offered her preferred food other than just meat. "Well, here we are," he said as he parked the car and quickly went over to her door and opened it with a smile. "Why thank you," she said as she grabbed his hand and let him help her up from the seat. "My pleasure," Naruto said smiling gently as he let her link her arm in his before they entered the restaurant and were quickly seated at a table. During the entire dinner he couldn't help but look her over as her dress and the light makeup she had on made her look truly gorgeous. Of course they had talked a lot as well and even flirted back and forth and told jokes to keep the mood going. Naruto really enjoyed the dinner and he could see so did Hailey considering the amount of blushing she had been doing throughout the dinner. "So Hailey, how is it that a appealing woman like you is still single? I honestly find it surprising that you don't have more men after you," he said with a smile as she blushed and let out a giggle behind her hand. "Well, I've been trying to find a good man for some time but I haven't been successful as they keep ending up terrible one way or another. Hell, my last boyfriend was pretty forgetful and a major deadbeat so I had to dump him," she said as she frowned with a sigh. "Sometimes I wish I can get out of this stupid trend since I'm afraid that if this continues that I'll never be happy in the end," she said with a frown before she felt Naruto hold her hand from across the table. "Don't worry Hailey, we all go through moments where things don't go well at all but I can see you are a strong woman and will find a good man," he said with a smile as he rubbed her hand as he held it. "Who knows, maybe Mr. Right is nearby. Maybe even in front of you, holding your hand and being an absolute gentleman," he said with a wink as she giggled and held his hand back with a smile. "Thanks Naruto, this really means a lot, I really needed that," she said as he smiled at her and squeezed her hand one last time before he let it go. The dinner continued on for another hour or so. They quickly lost track of time with how much they are enjoying the other's company and before they knew it they were already finished with their entire meal and ready to head out. Naruto smiled at Hailey as he pulled up to her house before she turned to him with a smile. "Walk me to the door," she asked as he smiled and nodded as he put his car in park and went over to her door and opened it again. "I have to say this was the best first date I have ever been on and with the most gorgeous girl I know made it even better," he said as she smiled at him with a soft blush. "Same here Naruto, it was perfect in every sense of the word except for one minor part," she said with a small suggestive smirk. "Oh, and what part went wrong?" he asked with a smirk and raised brow. "It went by too fast," she said with a smile as he chuckled and they reached the door. "Well, I'll have to make the next date longer next time for sure since I have to agree," he said as she smiled at him before grabbing his hand and before he could react he felt her soft supple lips against his. He smiled as he quickly started making out with her as he pressed her up against the door and ran his hands down her sides before she grabbed them and moved them to her butt, which he more than happily squeezed. What they didn't know was they were being watched by Hailey's mother as she blushed from behind the curtain. Wow, so intense, she thought as she watched Hailey into the embrace as Naruto squeezed and massaged her rear. Naruto smirked mentally as he felt her tongue enter his mouth before the embrace was deepened and he heard her mutter, "Spank me," in between kisses before he gave her but a quick slap that made her break the embrace in a loud that made her grow dark red. I better go before my parents question why I wasn't home sooner and Dad goes crazy like usual," she muttered as she was upset that she let that loud out as she had been enjoying their make-out session so much. "Well, we can always continue after our next date or the one after that or the one after that and so on," he said with a smirk as she smiled at him. "Oh, already have a second, third and further on dates planned?" she asked as he nodded. "Totally. There is no way I'm letting someone as great as you get away," he whispered into her ear as she blushed feeling his hot breath in her ear and grew a truly happy smile. "See you next time then, you have my number so don't keep me waiting," she said as she gave him one last deep embrace before she grabbed the spare key from under the mat and opened the door. "Don't worry, I won't keep you waiting at all my dear," he said before she closed the door leaving him on the porch. Once she closed the door behind her, she leaned back against it and traced her finger against her lips, still feeling the lingering warmth and sensation of the embrace with Naruto. It had felt so good to her that she started to feel a little wet in her panties. She was pretty sure once she got to her room she would be enjoying the rest of her evening having fun with herself. Her thoughts were soon interrupted with a slight cough and looking towards the source as she saw the table lamp turn on and reveal her mother on the far end of the couch. "So how was the date?" Francine asked with a sweet smile, though Hailey felt like something was off about it but ignored that with her euphoric high from her intense make-out session. "It was great, Mom, probably the best date I have ever had in my life," Hailey said as she smiled at her mom. "Well, I'm glad, sweetie. You deserve to have a great time with what seemed to be a really sweet boy," Francine said as Hailey nodded. "He was so sweet and such a gentleman, Mom." "It really was amazing, but I think I'm going to be heading to bed," she said as she started up the stairs as her mom nodded. "Well, get some rest, sweetie. I covered for you from your father, so don't worry. He's already asleep right now and told him that I'll stay up longer to see if you got back on time or not," Francine said as Hailey smiled at her and quickly headed up to her room. Francine grew a little worried as she pushed down the feelings of jealousy that was budding in her chest as she quickly reminded herself that she was happily married, though she couldn't help but think of how happy her daughter looked after the first date with Naruto, as she looked happier than she herself had in years, and it was only their first date, for goodness sakes. She quickly shook all those things out of her head as she went to the kitchen to get a drink. She needed to calm down and stop these thoughts as they were getting dangerous to borderline infidelic. But it seemed no matter what she did, the thoughts and images of what she had seen the two doing just kept coming back, with how her last client as a realtor was pleasing her daughter. She just hoped they faded away with time, since she did not need these thoughts in her head, and hopefully a good night's sleep could help. Langley Falls Shopping Mall. Naruto smiled to various women as he walked through the Langley Falls Mall, as he needed to get a couple items and pieces of furniture that he hadn't bought just yet that was important in certain parts of his house. From having an actual bed, he was fine sleeping in a futon for the time being. Several dressers, a flat-screen TV, and kitchen appliances are some of the few things he needs to acquire. Plus the fact he got to see more of the women of town and flirt, since Langley Falls might be a small little town, but he quickly found it was full of a good number of women, and boy where there was a bunch of gorgeous ones. Currently he was sitting in the food court relaxing and enjoying his food, as he had just finished buying his items or placing an order on them if they were bigger items. As he looked around, he clearly recognized a few girls from his school as they waved at him before he heard a loud yell, only to see Steve running through the mall entirely naked. Ugh, great. Just what I needed to see, he thought as he could see a few jocks high-fiving as they held Steve's clothes in their hands. Even though it was cruel, he couldn't help but stifle a laugh himself. Poor kid, I feel bad for him, but sometimes he brings it on himself, he thought with a sigh before he heard a chair at his table pull out and saw someone sit down at his table, and he grew a smirk as she was definitely another beauty. She had soft ebony skin that looked like milk chocolate in color, as her caramel brown eyes looked at him with a smirk on her full lips with maroon lip gloss. Her hair was long and black that went down to just below her shoulders as she wore tight outfit over her curvy figure. Her hair being held down by her minty green headband that is matching the rest of her attire. From what he could see as she was sitting down, she had a rather large rear that was held inside tight green shorts with large wide hips supporting her large rear, and as his eyes traveled upwards he saw her chest was at a medium-sized C-cup that were pushed into a tight, white mini t-shirt that was only a bit bigger than an average sports bra. "Well, hello there, what is your name?" he asked with a grin as she smiled at him with a flirtatious grin. "Name's Janet, and I know you, don't I?" she asked as he chuckled. "Trust me, I would remember you if we already met," he flirted as she giggled. "Well, we haven't been introduced, but you go to the same school as me. I saw you hanging out with Lisa and some of her friends the other day," she said as he nodded. "Well, if you did, why didn't you join us?" "I would have loved to have met you earlier," he said as she smiled at him. "Well, I was a bit busy with something, but trust me, you'll see more of me," she said as she looked down and noticed his bags. "So shopping around all alone, that's never fun, she said as he chuckled. Well yeah, considering I just moved here and I tend to travel light at times, so I needed to pick up a few things for my house, he said as she got a spark in her eyes. Well, do you need any help? They say a woman's touch can lighten up a place, especially since it is a lone bachelor's pad, she said, secretly fishing if he was single or not. Well, as you can see from the bags, I just grabbed a few light necessities for now. All I probably need now is just some more pieces of furniture and then my home is all set, he said as she smiled. Well, getting someone else's opinion could help if you want since I'm free all day, she said with a smirk as he chuckled in amusement. Sure, why not? Shopping around the mall with a gorgeous woman like yourself sounds like a perfect way to spend the rest of the afternoon, he said as he grabbed his bags before she got up from her seat and linked her arm with his with a smile on her face. So I'm just wondering, but why is an exotic beauty, such as yourself, all by yourself at the mall? Usually you would be accompanied by a group of your friends or a boyfriend, or a girlfriend, Naruto said smirking at her as she shook her head with a giggle. You're so funny, but no, I was supposed to be hanging out with some of my friends but they ended up ditching me for some brainless jocks. Didn't know what else I could do to kill an afternoon since I don't like spending time all by my lonesome. But there is a silver lining of course, Janet said with a smile. Oh. And what would that be? He asked with an obvious smirk. Well, I get to spend time with the hottest, new guy at school, she said as he chuckled and smirked at her. Only been here one day and already spending some alone time with a beauty of the school. Thank God for my luck, he joked as she gave him a playful slap on the chest as she giggled. Are you always this flirty with girls? She asked as he pulled her in close with his arm. Only with the truly gorgeous and loyal ones, he whispered in her ear as she grew a dark blush on her cheeks as he smiled at her and kept walking. After spending several hours through various stores and checking out a wide spread of selections. With the help of Janet he had done some choices on which ones would work best for his home and that would have the best results if he had others over, and as he finished up paying for the items he now only had to wait for the next several days for them to arrive. Well, I have to say I've had a productive and enjoyable time shopping with you, Janet, he said with a smile as she smiled back. So did I, but when you get your items you'll definitely have to call me and have me over so I can help break them in, Janet replied with a flirty grin as she handed him a piece of paper with her number before he chuckled and slipped the number in his pocket. Sounds fine to me, but I think your friends are calling for you, he said as he pointed behind her as she turned to see a group of girls waving at her. Seems like they ditched the jocks, he said with a chuckle. And of course they have terrible timing, she muttered as she turned back to him. Well, definitely give me a call if you ever want to hang out again, she said as she kissed him softly on his lips and quickly gave his butt a squeeze before walking off to her friends with a very visible sway in her hips that made her butt jiggle and made him stare strong. Once she walked off with her friends towards the exit of the mall he couldn't help but chuckle. If I keep attracting all these gorgeous women then I'll definitely have no trouble in the future, he thought as he pulled out Janet's number with a smirk and chuckled a bit more as he saw the embrace mark next to it. I certainly hope I see more of her, he thought as he entered her number into his phone and headed towards the exit and actually looked forward to school for once. Next day at school. Naruto groaned as he walked through school as he grew a bit annoyed due to an unexpected someone hitchhiking in his car and insisting on coming with him to see all the women he had met. Relax kid, I'll stay silent and act like a normal fox as long as you introduce me to some of your possible mates, Kurama whispered in his ear as he laid over his shoulder with a feral grin. Just behave, don't talk, and don't be as much as a pervert as you usually are, he whispered back as Kurama waved it off with one of his paws before he continued to walk through school. As they walked, Naruto silently started to thank Kurama as numerous girls had been following him and talking with him as they had been curious about Kurama. Some of the girls had been curious to point out of the fox having more than one tail, to which Naruto replied saying that he had told them was just a genetic mutation at BRTH having the extra tails, but they thought it was cool for the fox to have extra tails. Especially when they had started petting Kurama, they couldn't help but love of how soft and smooth the fur was that they just wanted to keep him all to themselves. All while this was happening Kurama was purring like crazy with how much he was enjoying the attention, especially when several girls were putting his face in between their melons. He couldn't help but sigh in great euphoria. He was definitely enjoying this. The only reason Naruto even allowed this was because it gave him points with the many girls he's met. "I didn't know you had such an adorable fox," Lisa said as she scratched behind Kurama's ear that made the fox kick his leg. "Can you bring him more to school more often? Maybe he can be the next mascot." "Please?" she asked as with the most adorable puppy dog pout and eyes she could muster and leaned towards him and pressed her melons together as she gave him a view of her generous chest through the low cut of her shirt again. I'll think about it, Lisa," he muttered out as he couldn't look away from staring at her chest, which made her smile happily. He turned his head though once he felt something brush up against his leg to see an ancient-looking dog looking up at him with a sad look in its eyes. "Oh my god, what the hell happened to this guy?" Naruto asked with a frown as he pet the dog. "You honestly should take better care of such an old dog," he said as he frowned at Steve as he basically dragged him through the school. "What? He's fine, my dad bought him yesterday, look at that perfect state of health," Steve said, not really caring for the dog. Naruto resisted hitting Steve as all his life he had loved animals and they oddly always liked him. Hell, they adored him. Even the most vicious animals like bears seemed to act like puppies to him, so to see someone being this neglectful to an old dog, especially one on the verge of death, made him seethe. "Maybe you should watch after that dog or else someone might get really angry at you," he whispered to Steve as he sent a powerful glare at the boy before he quickly picked up the dog and ran out of the hallway. "Anyway, Lisa, I was wondering if you would honor me to go on a date. You know, like a fancy restaurant or maybe go to that new carnival that just opened up?" Naruto asked as he smiled at her as she grew a huge smile on her face. "Yes. I would love to go on a date with you, Naruto," she said as she jumped up and hugged him tightly, pressing her chest against him. "Hey, race my number, call me later today when you want to go, I have to go tell my friends," she said as she handed him a piece of paper with her number before she kissed him on the cheek and ran off as he chuckled. "Second date in 2 days. You sure are going fast, kid," Kurama whispered as Naruto chuckled. "Not that it's a bad thing, just be careful considering every girl you get with we will have to explain to them about that situation," he said as Naruto nodded understandingly. "I know, don't worry, I can make this all work," he said as he continued to watch Lisa run off, smirking as he saw her but bounced nicely as her skirt flipped up occasionally, getting lustful glances from some wandering eyes, but they stopped once they were hit by his ki. "Well, I better think up some plans for the date. I wonder if the carnival has a Ferris wheel," he thought as he continued through school as Kurama continued to stare and breathe lustfully as they passed other girls in the school. Carnival. Naruto knew the choice of deciding to take her to the carnival was a good choice the second he saw her outfit and how gorgeous she looked. She wore a dark blue sweater that had a deep V that revealed a good amount of cleavage and tight black but shorts that accented her rear very nicely. Her hair had a slight curly to it as she wore a soft shade of red lipstick that made her lips look even more succulent. Lisa smiled at him as she held the fox stuffed animal that he had won for her at one of the several carnival booths. "This date has been so amazing, Naruto, I am so glad I agreed," she said as she leaned her head onto his shoulder as she held his hand. "Trust me, my dear, it's far from over," Naruto said, sending her a suggestive smirk before he turned to the Ferris wheel. "You want to ride the Ferris wheel before I have to get you home?" he asked as she smiled at him with a blush. "I would love to," she said as they went up to the attendant before he opened up a carriage for them. "Stop for a while once we get to the top and there is another 20 in it for you," he whispered to the man controlling the Ferris wheel as he slipped a 20 in his shirt pocket as the man smiled and nodded. Of course the man was going to do it anyway for the cute couple, but the money was an added bonus. Naruto smiled to Lisa as she scooted next closer to him as their carriage went higher up. "You know, this town might be a bit bland but it certainly looks lovely with the sunset and the view," Lisa said as he smiled at her as she held his hand. "Yes, this is a lovely view," he said as he smiled at her as he put his arm around her shoulder. "Lisa. blushed softly as she realized he was only looking at her before the Ferris wheel came to a slow stop as it reached the top and she realized what was going on. This time she was overjoyed since nothing could interrupt them. "So, I've noticed you're pretty popular with the girls since starting school. Why'd you choose to ask me out and not one of the others?" she asked as she scooted over until they were side by side. "Well, you were the first girl I met at the school and the second I saw you, you really caught my eye. Plus you're one of the most appealing girls I have ever seen," he said as she smiled and blushed. "You probably say that to every girl," she teased as he kissed her cheek. "I am someone who speaks the truth, Lisa, though I am not some shallow man that only goes for looks. There are some girls I have known that are pretty but terrible people. I asked you on this date because you are a sweet, kind and funny girl. Even as head cheerleader people would expect you to be stuck up, but I haven't seen anything like that in you," he said as he stroked her cheek and stared into her eyes. Unknowingly though, because of Naruto's confession of how he saw Lisa as someone better, he had changed Lisa for the better. Lisa let a small squeak out as she smiled up at him and nuzzled against his hand. "I know liking you will be troublesome with all the girls coming at you, but screw that. Right now I honestly couldn't care less," she said before she quickly moved onto his lap and quickly mashed her lips against his as they quickly started making out. Naruto smiled as he moved his hands under Lisa's sweater and ran his hands up her toned stomach to once again massage her melons. Once he noticed she wasn't wearing a bra, as Lisa deepened the embrace by snaking her tongue into his mouth. Naruto," Lisa moaned out as he continued to massage her melons. "This is amazing," she said in between kisses as he smiled at her. "You're amazing," he said as they continued to make out before they felt the Ferris wheel start moving again, reminding them they should stop before they got too far into it and get caught. Lisa let out a small groan of displeasure as his warm hands moved off her chest before she gave him one more deep passionate embrace. "We will continue this much later and maybe for once the shirt can come off," she said in a flirtatious tone before she wiggled her butt against his lap before she slid off onto the seat next to him just as they came back to the bottom. He smiled as he held Lisa's hand as they walked back to the car. "I had the greatest time, Naruto," she said as he opened her door for her. "Me too, Lisa, I really did," he said as he leaned down to give her one more embrace. "And I can't wait to tell everyone I am dating the most hottest and sweetest guy ever," she said as he smirked and got into the driver's seat. He knew he would have to tell her about his situation sooner rather than later, but he had faith she'd be okay with it. At least that's how it seemed to him. "Who knows, girls might get jealous and pine after me more," he teased as he started the car before he jumped a bit as she slid her hand up his leg. "Bring it, since doesn't every man want girls chasing after him? Who knows, might be fun," she said with a wink as she took her hand away. "Oh, she's definitely going to be okay with it," he thought with a chuckle before he drove onto the main street and smiled at Lisa, who couldn't have a happier looking smile on her face if she tried. Safe to say the date was a success. 1 week later. Naruto smiled as he walked through school with Lisa around his arm. For the last week he had officially started dating Lisa and he had enjoyed every second of it. From the numerous makeout sessions to just talking with her had been enjoyable. Though for the last week the other girls around the school had been even more forward and aggressive, even though he was dating Lisa, but he had already expected that and warned Lisa, who oddly enjoyed seeing her boyfriend being hit on by other girls. Apparently it made her feel like she was dating a celebrity or someone very very important. She even encouraged it with a few of her friends. He just chalked it up to a KNK of hers, but to be truthful he loved it and it only spelled good news for him because of his situation that he was planning to tell her later in the week. "So Naruto, why didn't you run for student council president? It would have been so amazing to not only date the hottest and sweetest guy in school but the most powerful as well," she purred out as he chuckled and kissed her cheek, making her squeal in delight as she loved it when he kissed her in public. "That power doesn't matter too much to me," he said with a shrug as she smiled. He also didn't care for it because he was already powerful outside of school and being a public role like student council president really didn't give him any more power than he already had, so it would be meaningless. Lisa let out a quick yelp of pain as someone behind her snapped her BR strap before they turned around to see Steve smiling down at Lisa as they were sitting down at their usual table. "Hey Lisa, did it hurt? Did it hurt you good?" Steve asked with a slight creepy grin that made her cringe. "I was just wondering if you wanted to accompany me on a date tomorrow," he asked before Naruto growled and stood up. "Steve dash," he started to say angrily before Lisa placed her hand on his chest. "Foxy, don't worry about it, I got this," Lisa said before she punched Steve strong in the face, sending him skidding back and knocking him out instantly. Some people were surprised by the new show of strength since the old Lisa would have just let her current fling defend her. But to the entire school Lisa had evolved since dating Naruto. She was kinder and nicer to everyone and stood up for herself and her friends if attacked, not letting herself appear weak. "Wow, babe, that was amazing," he whispered out as he kissed her neck, making her smile and wrap her arms around his neck as Steve's friends picked him up and dragged him to the nurse. "You like that, Foxy?" she asked as she let him pick her up and set her on his lap. It was so hot, he teased her as she blushed and nuzzled against him as she enjoyed being so close to him. She just hoped she could stay like this with him for a very long time. Next day, Naruto and Lisa groaned as somehow Steve had been elected into student council president and quickly, in a matter of 2 class periods, started changing a lot of things about the school. Such as lasagna every day, changing the periods to Steve's, and taking over the principal's office. "As long as he keeps it below crazy, I think it won't be that bad," he said as he squeezed her hand with a smile as they walked by the new chocolate lockers, which were a new and odd addition to the school. "I'm just surprised he can get away with all this. I mean, there was a kid in my 3rd hour computer class watching Pawn," she said with a disgusted GG as she shivered. It wasn't even that he was watching Pawn that disgusted her, no, the part that disturbed her was what that he was watching that really made it gross. She didn't want to think about it as she took her mind off it by giving her boyfriend a deep loving embrace. "Why hello Lisa," a voice spoke out behind her as she groaned and turned around. "What is it, Steve?" she asked as she rolled her eyes and stayed in her boyfriend's arms. "Well, I was wondering, now that I am student council president and the most powerful man at school, if you would like to have a date with me. This lunch. I have booked the entire cafeteria for our date," Steve said as she resisted the urge to GG. "Steve, honestly no thank you. If it isn't obvious, I am happily dating my Foxy here. So stop constantly asking me out," she spoke as she stared him in the eyes, hoping to get her point across. But I'm the most powerful man in school, you should ditch this loser and date me." Steve yelled, confused why he was still rejected. "Power doesn't make everything, Steve," Naruto said as he frowned at the small kid. "You need to have a good personality and find someone mutually interested in you to be in a happy relationship. You can't just force someone or use power to make someone go out with you," he said as Steve frowned and stared at the floor. "That's what got us together. We both fell for each other because we like who the other one was," she said as she smiled up at him and laid kisses down his jawline before kissing his lips as he picked her up and made her squeal before Steve growled and stomped off, clearly enraged. Naruto frowned as he got a really bad feeling as he saw the anger in Steve's eyes as he set Lisa back down on the ground. He knew something bad was gonna happen. 30 minutes later. Naruto groaned as this was one of the times he hated being wrong, as Steve had gone entirely power-hungry and had put the school in lockdown, trapping everyone inside. His only demand was a date with Lisa, which she refused instantly, hence the reason why no one was allowed to leave. He also locked himself in the principal's office like a coward he was, not leaving until something busted in or he finally got a date with Lisa, so they were waiting for someone to bust in. It wasn't even that he was dangerous since he had no weapon and had no combat prowess and no experience whatsoever. "Okay, that's it, I'm tossing him out a window since I have places to be with Lisa in an hour since we have reservations," he grumbled out as he gave Lisa a quick embrace before heading to the door. "Wait, Steve said to stay in our classrooms," one kid said as he recognized him as one of Steve's friends. "Yeah, and what is he going to do about it? He's not even dangerous to even you guys. He doesn't have the power to keep us in here, for goodness sake," he yelled as he opened the door and started walking towards the principal's office as people also realized this and started to form a mob and follow Naruto to the office. "Oi! Steve, open up!" Naruto yelled as he kicked open the door, making Steve yelp from behind the desk as he grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. What are you doing here? Why aren't you all in your classes?" he stammered out as Naruto rolled his eyes. "You have no power and you are annoying, so we are doing a coup d'état," he said as he picked up the intercom with his free hand as he turned it on. "Attention cops," he yelled as he opened the window. "Catch," he said as he tossed Steve out the window just as he saw Stan running towards the building as he used enough force to make sure Stan would be able to reach him. "Well, now that is over, come on Lisa, we have reservations," he said with a smile as she giggled and grabbed onto his arm as he led her from the school. Later that night, Naruto was a bit nervous as he decided today was day he had to tell Lisa any longer and it would start to get dangerous. "Wow, this is a really nice house," Lisa said as she pet Kurama and sat on the couch. "Thanks Lisa, glad you like it considering you are going to be over here a lot more often," he said as he handed her the mug of hot cocoa that he made for her before he sat on the table in front of her. "So did you bring me here to just mess around or do you have something especially important to do?" she asked with a smirk before she frowned at the serious look on her Foxy's face. "Is something wrong?" she asked worriedly as she set down the mug and held his hand comfortably as he shook his head. "Nothing is wrong, but for the next few minutes I need you to just listen to me and wait until the end to ask questions," he said as he frowned and looked in her eyes as she nodded nervously before he kissed her hand. He sighed before he slowly started to tell her his odd situation. "Well, it all starts with my family on my mom's side. Every male on her side has overactive energy that often expresses itself in certain urges," he said as she grew a dark blush once she realized what he meant. "Which is why I can be so passionate at times and really get into it, but the thing is to satisfy my overpowered urges my family often takes on multiple lovers, the fewest any of my family has had is 3 and the largest being unknown, but don't get me wrong, you are the only girl I have right now," he said as she slowly nodded, "well, officially anyway. But there is a certain thing that makes me more active than others of my family and he is currently sitting in your lap," he said as she stared down at the fox in her lap before Kurama jumped off of her lap and onto one of the ottomans. "Well, I guess this is where I come in," Kurama said as Lisa's eyes grew wide. "Several years ago Kurama, a powerful spirit from the spirit realm, came to Earth and bonded with me, creating a connection where his urges which he restrained for more than a millennium and made it so everything else would exist through me, making me even more, well, passionate and well-endowed," he said as he looked away in embarrassment and squeezed her hand. "But sadly that is not all of it," Kurama said as he scratched behind his ear with his paw. "The kid here has to express his urges to keep himself sane. If he doesn't, the poor kid will go into an insane lust-filled craze that I have been keeping at bay for the most part until he finds suitable mates," he said as Lisa grew a worried look on her face. "It is okay, I have had years to somewhat control my lust to a point where I won't flirt with any girl I see, but it is one of the reasons I really get into it when we make out," he said as she squeezed his hand. "But you're still in pain, aren't you?" she asked as he slowly nodded. "I can understand if this is insane and you want to break up with me, and I will in no way force you to do anything you don't want, but I thought it would be best if I came clear about my situation before we got any more serious," he said before he found himself pushed back onto the table as she sat on top of him. "Naruto Uzumaki, you listen here and listen well," she said as she stared down at him. "I care for you so much that sometimes it scares me, but if keeping you in my life means sharing you with girls, then so be it," she said as she kissed him deeply with all the love and passion she could muster for the man before her. "You could have 50 girls, and as long as you cared for me as much as you do now, I would be the happiest girl on earth. If keeping you safe and the man I care for means you being with many girls, then that will just have to be the way it is," she said as she kissed him again and smiled as he kissed her back and held her close to him as tears streamed down from his eyes in happiness. "Lisa, thank you so much for accepting this, for accepting me. I honestly don't know what would have happened if you left," he whispered out as she smiled up at him. "I will never leave you," she said as she grabbed his hand and stood up before pulling him up the stairs and towards his bedroom. "Wait, We don't have to do this right now if you don't feel comfortable, he quickly told her as she smiled at him and pushed him onto his bed. Trust me Foxy, I want this, I want you, I've tried to hold it back, but my restraints loosen every day I'm near you, so please. Lisa said smiling warmly. If that is your wish my queen, so be it. Naruto said smiling as Lisa smiled happily and surprised him as she quickly started to undress. Lisa smirked at him as she quickly threw her sweater onto the floor, exposing her high D-cup melons as they bounced a bit before she quickly squeezed them. You like Foxy? She asked as she rubbed her soft pink tips before she squealed and found herself under him as he smirked at her. The first time I get to see these, so yes I do like, I like a lot, he said as he softly ate on them as she let out a loud mmm and started to squirm. Oh God. More, she mowed as he squeezed them more and nibbled on them as she threw her head back. Naruto, please I want to please you, she spoke in between pants before she found her short shorts pulled off of her, revealing her lacy black thong to her lover before he looked at her nervously. Are you sure you are okay with this? He asked as she smiled at him. Foxy, if I wasn't, do you really think I would be laying on your bed in nothing but a black thong? She asked with a smirk as she stroked his cheek. I am ready for this. Also if I am going to go along with this plan then you can be DMN sure I am going to be the first you have CC with, she said as he smiled and kissed her deeply as he slid down her panties to reveal her glistening clean-shaven PP as she blushed a bit in embarrassment. Now you get naked too, it's only fair, she said as he chuckled and slowly undid his buttons to reveal his chiseled abs to her, making her slightly drool before he slid down his pants and boxers to reveal his fully irked and throbbing 12-inch member that made her squeak in shock. TT that's going to go in me, she asked in shock as he shook his head. Not all of it, just enough to make it pleasurable for you and not hurt, he assured her as he kissed up her long legs until he placed one directly on her PP making her mmm and buck her hips up, allowing him to grab a hold of her perfectly large-sized butt, biggest he's held by far. He could feel his member throbbing more and more as he heard her and he continued to lick and embrace her PP until she started to push his head away. No I want you inside me before I leak, she said as she muttered the last part from behind her hands as she covered her face though he could see the dark red blush that was on her face. He smiled at her as he moved her hands from her face and gave her a soft tender embrace as he pressed the tip of his member against her pages. I'm going to have to go in pretty quick so I don't draw out the pain, so feel free to scream or bite or whatever helps ease the pain while I go in and until you get used to it, he said as she nodded and hugged him tightly, burying her face in the crook of his neck. He rubbed her butt softly before he quickly plunged 8 of the 12 inches into her as she let out a scream before biting into his shoulder to muffle the scream before he pet her head. Shoo, it's okay, I won't move until it stops hurting as much, he whispered to her as she nodded and let go of his shoulder and kissed it once she saw how strong she had bitten. He stayed still for a good 5 minutes before she nodded to him. I think I'm good, just go slow please, she whispered out as he nodded and kissed her before he slowly started to move in and out of her. Lisa had expected her first time to be painful considering that is what she had heard from her older friends that had graduated, but the only painful part was it entering her, but as he thrusted the pleasure heavily outweighed the pain. Na Naruto, give me more, she moaned out as she felt him squeeze her melons again. Naruto let out a pleasure-filled groan as he felt her PP squeeze his member tightly as he moved in and out of her, picking up speed as she continued to mmm. Right now he was going off pure instincts of what to do, which he figured had to do with either Kurama or his family as right now was his first real time. He felt his member start to throb more and more as he grew closer to finishing. Lisa, I'm close, he groaned out as she smiled up at him. Me too, just a little longer Naruto, she spoke out in a soft tone as she held her arms up before he held her close and continued to move. Lisa could feel her orgasm coming as he continued to hit her at her deepest spots and she wanted it so badly. Naruto. I am leaking, she moaned out as she felt the orgasm hit her strong before she felt him pull out of her before something warm hit her chest several times. She smiled down as she saw him panting over her as she saw white liquid that she knew as juice was covering her chst Naruto, so tasty, she moaned out as she scooped up some with her finger and ate up the rest before he chuckled and laid next to her and held her close. Naruto smiled happily as he and Lisa lay together on the bed and held each other close. He was thankful he had Lisa call home and tell her parents she would be staying over at a friend's house, so she didn't have to leave his side. Naruto, she muttered out in a tired tone as his eyes started to droop. Yes, my queen, he asked as she kissed her cheek. Will you be here in the morning? I don't want this to be a dream, she whispered as he smiled and stroked her cheek, brushing her hair behind her ear. Of course, babe, he said as she smiled. You promise? Lisa smiled as she looked up at him with her eyes half open. Forever and ever, babe, he said as nuzzled up against him with a tired smile as she drifted off to sleep. Forever and ever, she said before she passed out with a content smile on her face. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragon from Heaven on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.